What's up, guys? So I'm here with Dylan Innes. Really excited to have this conversation with you, man, and talk about my favorite topic, Frisson.
Thank you for
Would
having me.
would you like to just kind of introduce yourself, tell us who you are?
My name's Dylan Innes. I'm a musician out of North Carolina. Write songs and perform them live with my band.
I know you showed up on BBC's segment of Frisson, and do you use that to sort of that feeling of goosebumps and chills to produce your music and write songs?
Well, I think in the BBC thing, I discussed how I use Frisson while I'm writing a song. If I'm playing my guitar and I'm singing and I think of a lyric and I'm like, oh, that just hits. That feels very relevant to what I've been going through or whatnot. I'm like, okay, if that gave me chills, it might give someone else chills. I should probably write that down and pursue that idea. I think that's what I talked about mostly in that interview there. So I use that as a songwriting tool, and but I also love to experience it by watching movies and listening to music because you know you're listening or watching something good when you get that feeling.
Absolutely, definitely. And when was the first time you felt Frisson?
Ooh, the first time the first time I can remember was I think we discussed that song. It's called "Farewell Transmission" by Songs Ohio. I
Yeah,
remember the first time I heard that song, I was just like, just got this like somber, beautiful electric guitar part, and the band kicks in. It's just like, you get that feeling.
that's awesome. And so you kind of talked about how music kind of triggers that feeling of frisson for yourself. Are there any other triggers that will give you frisson as well?
Definitely when I'm watching movies, like
Yeah.
one that comes to mind is Interstellar. For some
Oh
reason,
yeah, that's
yeah.
a popular one for frisson. You're right.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw that movie, I just thought I was going to see some. My mom was like, "Do you want to go see this Matthew McConaughey movie?" And I was like, "All right, you know." And then ended up being Interstellar. I was like, "Whoa, what did I just witness? That was crazy."
So like, you were just in awe? Were you inspired by that? Like the message that it had?
I think the topic of like love and ultimate sacrifice
Mm.
was just so beautiful. That's probably what inspired the frisson in that movie. Um, yeah, I guess it would be the message and the bravery. For some reason, like courageous moments seem
Mm.
to when I see other people do like courageous things, that gives me frisson often.
Yeah. Is there any parts of the body that you feel frisson as well when you're like watching these movies or listening to music or playing music?
Definitely the back of my neck for sure. And I would now that you mentioned that, I'm gonna pay attention to more of where I experienced that. Honestly, before talking to you, I never really like thought of where am I actually feeling that. But it seems to start in the back of the neck and go down my arms and down my spine as well.
That's a common one, and
Mm.
I actually talk about this one lab, Goose Lab, I believe they're called, and they have like this specialized camera that takes like it measures the intensity of the piloerection that's occurring on the forearms, but the back of the neck is a very common place, and my cousin as well, he explains it just like that, and it just like it starts in the back of the neck and just sort of radiates down. That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite songs that you've done is Little Blue House. It actually gives me a lot of goosebumps. I'm in the gym. I love to tap into, my euphoric goosebumps and chills for Son. It helps push me past whatever I thought I could because it gives me that adrenaline rush. Um, and just tell me a little bit about that. Like, what was the when you were like, give me that thought process of you writing that song? Like, what gave you that impetus to write a song like that?
It was definitely like a end of summer melancholy sort of track. Uh, I had been thinking a lot about a couple different relationships I had, and one of them was more of a crush, and one of them was like a relationship that had broken up. And I kind of weaved those two together into one song. So just a lot of end of summer angst mixed with pining away for someone and reflecting on an old relationship kind of converge into one song. And I think the chord progression definitely has a melancholy sort of feeling as well. Also in the song, it switches time signatures a couple of times. And I think that kind of adds to the transition within the song as well.
I find that really fascinating that you're tapping into Frisson as a way to sort of give yourself a gauge for what you're producing, but also as like this like sort of, I know you guys mentioned in the BBC segment this uncanny like knowingness, like this knowingness that yeah, it feels right. It hits, you know. Um, what are some of your triggers for feeling Frisson? And what are some of the ways that you know like you get into that zone where it just like you have that knowingness?
Well, when we're performing, when I feel that way, I know I'm not as worried about what is what's going wrong with my guitar, or what's happening with my voice, or I'm thirsty, or whatever. I'm just performing. I'm in the song. What is the song about? I'm gonna try and communicate that as best I can. Or even beyond that, I'm not even aware what the song is about anymore. It's just coming out. And that's even a better thing. Because when you're thinking about what is the song about, you're kind of still out of it. But if you're just in the song conveying it, that's when you get those emotional connections.
How did you get started with music?
Well, I guess when I started writing and recording, I'd been playing guitar. I started playing guitar because I did musicals in middle school and stuff like that. And one year I had to learn guitar for this part that I was doing. So that's when I started playing. But then I had this one teacher, this one guitar teacher. His assignment to me every week was to write a song. And I would write a song every week, and most of them were terrible. And he would tell me that, which honestly now I kind of appreciate. But at the time, I was like, dang, this is harsh. But so yeah, I started writing and recording. And then one year, my parents got me this little like mixing board thing, and it came with some free software. And so I plugged it in, didn't know anything about what I was doing. I didn't look up any videos or anything, but I just started recording and just kept doing it. And I've been doing it since like I was 14. So I've been doing it about 11 years now. And so, yeah, I've just been recording stuff and putting it out there and trying to get better and better at it as I progress.
Now, when you were doing that, when did Frisson kick in? Did it actually start kicking in as you were doing that sort of creative process? Then you started to realize like, oh, like I got like this feeling for it. Maybe I should pursue that.
It actually took a long time for me to get positive feelings out of doing it because the early stages were so rough.
Mm-hmm.
I thought people would just record an album by just hitting record and then they just get this amazing thing. I realized, oh wow, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. This isn't. So I think maybe just a few years ago, I started getting positive feelings and positive feedback enough to where people's feedback was, this made me feel this way, um, or like a few months ago, I got this note from one of my friends. It was right before I played this show, and he was like, "Man, I just want to let you know I'm so excited for this show or whatever, and I want you to let you know that like your music means a lot to me." And I was like, I've been so obsessed with how many people are listening to my music that like I forget that I have people connecting emotionally with my music, and that's why I do it in the first place. And so
Mm-hmm.
him telling me that, and that was that show we had discussed earlier, that where I just completely got to just be in the moment. And so him telling me that kind of was the catalyst for that moment, I guess.
Yeah. And when you think back to those times when they tell you that, like that, one of my videos, I talk about gratitude and how gratitude is like really when we receive gratitude, that's when we start to really feel it. And as I'm talking right now, I start to get like the goosebumps and the chills. And one of the practices that Andrew Huberman talks about, neuroscientist from Stanford, is he says that the most powerful gratitude practice is to think back to when people gave us gratitude or gave us thanks or just something that or think about a time where it moved you or something that gave you some awe inspiration. He says that that's like a good practice to like just sort of remind ourselves of those things and then try to get into a zone where we're producing more of those moments for us to have more and more triggers, at least for like gratitude, receiving thanks, and things like that. I mean, for me, I think that it's a beautiful way to have it be reciprocated. Do you get like any goosebumps or chills when you think about like gratitude or when people gave you that feedback to your work?
Definitely. I think the practice of gratitude gives you a better handle on day-to-day life, or even things I think about at the end of the day. I'm like, this was such a bad day.
Mm,
But not today, but when I'm having a bad day, I'm thinking, okay, this is such a bad day, but I got to eat a good meal at the end of the day. I have this like roof above my head, and then you can start being like, okay, I'm actually doing pretty good in the scheme of things.
yeah.
And that feels great.
And then sort of like walk me through the process of how you use Frisson to like leverage that feeling for maybe like that creative process of like when you're sitting down with your guitar, like maybe is that you hit a certain like chord or maybe a certain thought that pops in your head and you start to feel it and then maybe like kind of like pursue that as a way to like generating a song or something like that. Is that part of your process?
I I almost never I never am like I need to trigger Frisson to move this forward. It's almost always a result of me just stumbling upon some idea without any intention, I guess. And I think having that ability would be amazing. But for me, I
Gotcha.
guess in my practice, it's just been, oh, I got some goosebumps from that. Let me keep going with that.
Yeah. And like, part of what I talk about on my channel is voluntarily generated piloerection, where a few case studies have been mentioned where people can generate this feeling. And then from there, it kind of like sets a platform of like, okay, well, now I have this feeling. Now it can influence my thoughts, my emotions, and my actions and decisions. Um, and basically, it's interesting because I've also been sort of trying to stay in that feeling as much as I can to connect with my patients. I'm an occupational therapist. I work in nursing homes as well as high schools, and I try to become like I call the trigger or become a trigger for others to sort of have their eureka or aha moments. And one of the things I talk about is flow research and the idea that it is a state of we're in between like alpha and theta, and that's like the window to hit gamma. And in gamma, these are like these brain waves. Gamma is considered a very high functioning and increased perception of our awareness because of how fast and how cohesive our brain is functioning. And right now we're communicating at a way of beta waves, which is around like 30 hertz, but gamma can be 5 times up to maybe even 10 times greater than that. And it's interesting when I was reading the research when they say that those aha or eureka moments where like, oh, you really figured something out, you connected the dots of something, is a gamma spike. They measure that as a gamma spike with EEGs. And I feel like when I'm in Frisson, I'm just in this like consistent aha moment. And I just get a lot of those ahas, like things that make sense. What do you think about that?
It made me think about when I've been communicating with people and I've gotten the Frisson, and it makes me feel like I'm communicating at such a high level and builds that immediate connection with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in a relationship and you're talking to them and it just feels right, and you're not worried about and worried about what you're saying, or is this whatever. It's just that's how you build genuine connection with people. And I think Frisson can definitely play a part in.
I agree with you. I think it's interesting because sometimes, like even during this conversation, there are times that what you were saying gave me and triggered goosebumps within myself. And I find that really fascinating. And maybe like as you were saying it, maybe you had goosebumps or chills. And it could have been a simultaneous thing because I realized like in my life a lot of times when I'm experiencing like a full body frisson moment, that there's a good chance that the other person may experience frisson as well, as long as they're processing like, like what I'm saying, and it's sort of internalized within themselves to cause themselves have that feeling. I find that really interesting, and definitely something that we should probably explore more as far as like research is concerned. But it's funny you talk about that, when like building genuine connections with people and then connecting with them. And I think that's just it's an interesting thing, because it could be simultaneously felt. And then from there, it's like there's like that uncanny level of like communication where like clarity comes in, where it's like what you're saying, I'm processing auditorily, but I'm also processing it with my somatosensory system, where it's like now my skin is involved. Now my electrodermal activity is increasing, where it's like there are certain aspects of my body that's actually processing the information in a whole different way. And it's in a euphoric way, how information can be experienced euphorically. I find really fascinating. And I think that that's kind of like alluding to your point where people can feel that level of connection with someone based on like just talking about something. And I mentioned in one of my videos, Jim Quick, he's like a brain coach. He had a traumatic brain injury as a kid, and he was labeled as the boy with the broken brain. And he calls Frisson, he labels it as truth bumps. And me saying that gives me goosebumps, because I feel like what I process as something that's ultimately true to myself, or what I want to see as my greatest self, it's like a feedback loop. Like maybe when I'm
Mm.
talking to someone, I feel that feedback of like, yeah, that's what I should say, or that's what I want to say. Like that's because that's the person I want to be, or that's the thing that I want them to feel. And then it's just like maybe that has something to do with it, as far as like processing what we believe is true, or what really resonates with us.
I think
What
a
do you
lot of
think about
times,
that?
when you go throughout like just the day-to-day life, we keep a lot of things in. And so when you say truth bumps, that makes me think about how usually I get those goosebumps when I feel like I'm expressing something that I've been holding in for a long time, or finally talking to someone that I feel like I can actually be myself with. So yeah, that's very interesting. I've never heard it called truth bumps, but that seems very right.
Yeah, and I know they conducted surveys, and they've realized that the common denominator with people is that there's a level of openness. There's a level of openness that they have for experience, and like empathy, levels of empathy as well. I feel like Frisson is an expression of empathy. I think if we look at our sympathetic nervous system and how it functions, it usually functions for like our immediate survival, like of how we are in our environment, and it triggers our norepinephrine and things like that, adrenaline, so we're more alert and aware. But on the other end, it's like when you think about Frisson, how studies show that it drops you into theta, which is a brainwave state where we're more conscious of our internal environment. And then we're less conscious of our external environment, which is kind of like the reverse opposite, another side of the coin, if you will, as how the sympathetic nervous system functions. And then instead of like being driven on like fear, anxiety of how this physical self will survive in the environment, in a hostile environment, it's now driven by fear, experiences of like gratitude, joy, to a level where you experience like this dopamine rush. And I know it's explained also in the BBC video that it's similar pathways to like drugs or like sex and things like that. And I know I'm mentioning those things, but it's just something to keep in mind as far as like another way to experience life in a very positive way, but in a way that we can help others feel as well, especially if it's driven along with like altruistic ideas, or like things that make us feel awe-inspired, or people that do things that are for them, not only for themselves but for others, because I feel like that's like kind of the bullseye for a lot of people, where they feel those levels of frisson. So I don't know if you have any ideas on that, or I just kind of think that it's a new way for our sympathetic nervous system to be expressed.
Well, you mentioned that like doing things for other people. like that can, even the smallest things can kind of trigger those um like goosebump moments. Like earlier today, I went out and bought a new shirt, and this old lady was coming out, and I was like, I'm gonna hold the door. She was like, "Oh, thank you, young man." And I was just like, yeah, even like little things can be something dumb like that,
Yeah,
but like that stuff feels so good.
it can. And I think like, you can look back at those times that you made those decisions and you've done those actions, and then you can like that receiving of the gratitude, it can get you to a platform where like you can just start to feel more Frisson and try to like what I try to do is just try to like, make other people feel that too. But I
Mm.
feel like, if we're functioning in Frisson and then we're hitting flow research shows us that we're 500 up to 500% more productive than we could be if we were in just like a normal state. And
Mm.
I think like if Frisson is connected to flow, as I've talked about in some of my other videos, showing that it is similarly connected via like the neuroelectricity, the neuroanatomy, as well as basically the neurochemistry as well. If we're in a capacity where we can do a lot more than we normally could, then those type of things become a lot easier, I feel like, And do you notice like when you're maybe you're performing or maybe you're like like on stage or writing a song that you get like in this like in the zone like this moment where like you don't your body's needs kind of just drop down and you can just be fully there in that moment. Do you feel that?
I've had to really work on getting there. I used to be so, the little things like before I'd perform, I'd be like, how's my shirt? My shirt feels weird, or like I'm thirsty, or, you know, did I go to the bathroom frequently, or like, or not frequently, but like recently enough before I go on stage. And then you're so worried about everything that you can't perform. But something that helped me was like Wim Hof breathing. I'm not sure if have you heard of
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
That helped me a lot before I perform. And like, making sure like I pull my arms back. I don't know why that helps me so much, like kind of get some physical confidence, and hopefully the mental confidence will come with that. Um, I used to be the worst performance anxiety to where I felt like I was about to die before I go on stage, and I hated performing. So
Yeah.
I've had to work towards that. But now it feels amazing.
Do you feel like you can tap into like Frisson to help with that performance anxiety?
I don't feel like I have explored that enough or at all. I haven't tried to use Frisson, I guess, consciously.
Gotcha.
It's
And I
more
know
just been
that.
like a byproduct of whatever's going on.
Got it, got it. Like a byproduct of you watching like a movie. You mentioned Interstellar or like
Yeah.
any of those like songs that you've mentioned as well. Interesting, interesting. Now, when you think about those things, does it start to give you that feeling of frisson when you think about those times that you had it?
I have to think about the emotional content within the song or movie for me to get the feeling. Like if someone says Interstellar, I'm not just like, you know,
Yeah.
but like if I think of why, the main character's sacrifice in pursuit of saving his family and his planet, and like that's dope. So like that gives me goosebumps in Frisson. Are goosebumps and Frisson, is that interchangeable?
Yeah, pretty much. I think
Okay,
Goosebumps is more of the common term used.
gotcha.
And so, like, talk to me about that moment. Like, take me into that moment of what you felt with your body.
It feels like it stems from the back of my neck down my arms mostly, and then a little bit of like a lingering feeling down the spine. But it almost feels like there's like a disconnect between them all in a weird way. It flows through, but they are separate, if that makes sense.
Interesting, interesting. And do you get any moments like where you feel like some radiation around your head as well?
No, I think it's mostly from the back of my neck down my limbs and spine.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I hear very common things is like could be forearms, back of the neck is a really common one. I know a bunch of people that have it starts on the back of the neck and then just radiates down. That's so fascinating. And how long does it last for you?
Feels like just a few seconds. I think it comes on strong and then you kind of get this like vibration for maybe 2 seconds and then it kind of goes away.
Gotcha, gotcha. So the other thing I wanted to ask was how long have you been tapping into Frisson and Goosebumps? And do you feel like it's maybe depending on the intensity, that's what you want to pursue? Or kind of like take me through that process of like, yeah, like the intensity, like if you're feeling it really intense, is that something that you know, or less intensity? Kind of like give me a gauge there.
I think it's the gauge is kind of black and white where it's like didn't give me goosebumps. This did give me goosebumps or Frisson. And so I haven't necessarily taken the gauge any further than that, which I should probably try. That sounds like a good idea, being like, how much Frisson did this give me? I'll try that. But it's been pretty black and white so far. And I think for the last few years I've been using that as a way to kind of gauge what to pursue. When I finally just decided I'm a songwriter, that's what I do first and foremost. And I'm gonna pursue, I might not have the most lit stage show and I might not be crushing it with like guitar solos, but I can write a good song that people can emotionally connect to.
Definitely, definitely. And I find that so beautiful that you want people to connect with your work and also having that like awareness of Frisson and that giving you that euphoria and you wishing to have other people feel that euphoria. That's so fascinating. And I think that it's a wonderful approach toward an art such as, singing, songwriting. And I've met some people recently who have an espresso shop where they drink coffee and they feel like they call it that moment of frisson, where like they get their, you know, hair standing up on their forearms and things like that. And it's so fascinating because that is like a peak of life, right? I mean, that's such a peak emotion. It's such a peak feeling. It's so intense. I actually related to a traumatic experience. It's kind of funny. I mean, because like trauma has such a negative connotation, but like when I had my like frisson moment, that was extremely potent. I was like, oh my god, I'm traumatized, but it's so traumatically positive, and I was like, oh, traumatically positive experience.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and then I started to think like, hey, like, well, how can we make other people feel that? And I think it's interesting that you say that certain things, if it gives me frisson, it's sort of like a way to be like, okay, well, if I got frisson from this, and I had like, that feedback, that biofeedback loop, that my body and my mind is connecting, like via like they like to say interoception, where it's like you're checking in with yourself and you're checking in with how your body feels, your mind is like kind of connected in that way. And then you're feeling that sort of connection as far as like that feeling. That's sort of like a way to say, okay, yeah, like this can trigger for other people because it's triggering for me. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sometimes I worry that with that process, maybe I'm hoping I'm right that if this makes me feel a certain way, then hopefully it will make someone else feel a certain way. Sometimes I do it's hard to convey the same emotional message. And that's the hard part is you have to refine your message so that people can connect on the same emotional level. Because if you wrote the song, you know everything about all those experiences. The person hearing that might not know why you described the sky like that or other details, so you gotta like be able to refine that and send that out in a way um that people can attach to. I think like melancholy seems to inspire a lot of frisson in me as well, so I think a lot of my songs kind of have like a melancholy kind of tone to them.
gotcha. And I think that's really amazing that you're trying to, convey a message to your audience and convey a feeling to them. And I know you mentioned that people were showing gratitude to you, and how that sort of became like that loop where it's like, yeah, I'm doing this and I'm receiving this, and then it's like building that, you know, like cookie jar, if you will, of all those moments of gratitude that can give you those chances to feel Frisson. Really fascinating. And we
Yeah,
have a few more, yeah, we have a few more minutes here.
mm.
Just sort of like tell us what you got going on. Is there any other like places you'll be performing or things of that nature?
Well, next week, I don't know when this video is going to come out, but we got we got a lot of shows coming up in the North Carolina area. So and I'm about to take the band. My band is called Dylan Innes in the Business. So I'm about to take the business and go to the recording studio, and we're gonna cut a little short EP, and so hopefully that'll be out soon. And I've just been releasing music steadily over the last few years, so look me up, Dylan Innes on Spotify and all that jazz.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop all the links in the description below. I definitely want guys to follow you. Everyone follow you. You're awesome.
Oh,
Love
thank
talking
you.
to you, having this moment. A lot of Frisson moments for me as well.
Yeah, thank you for
And
having me.
yeah, man, I definitely stay in touch
Will do.
and definitely want to see what you got coming up next. And yeah, really appreciate it. And hey, who knows? Maybe in the future we'll meet up. We'll have other discussions, or we'll do another episode like this.
Yeah, sounds good. If you're ever in North Carolina, you're in New York, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never even been to New York before, so yeah,
Hey,
if
man,
we
there's
ever,
plenty of venues here, so you know, definitely check it out. It's a great place to get your feet wet and just feel that New York City vibe.
I would love that. I would love that. I'll definitely hit you up if I'm ever in New York.
Appreciate it, man. So glad to have you on. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Travis.
Links to Dylan's music are posted in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to learn more about Frisson, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Remember this, good vibes save lives, and I'll see you in the next one.